Hey guys, Youngblood with you for the 48th episode of the Inbox, and we're starting off with a question from Dan Kylene. As I've been thinking about the game every single day, I'm so damn hyped about it, I've become worried about the amount of NPCs there's going to be in the game. I don't think that there's going to be enough people around the universe. If you think about a 9-to-1 ratio to NPC to actual players, there's going to be about 10 million people spread across the verse, with the amount of players being estimated around 1 million. That is nowhere near enough people for there to be an emerging experience all the time. It's not even enough people for a single UEE planet. Am I wrong to be worried about this? So I think what we're actually going to see is more of a 9-to-1 relationship to how often we're going to be interacting with other characters or players. You know, if you go to a UEE populated planet, there's probably going to be a ton of NPCs there that you wouldn't necessarily put in the same category as ones that you're going to interact with. You know, think about walking around the streets. You know, you're probably going to be passing people that you're not going to be able to have any real interactions with. Kind of like if you were to walk down, New York City on, one of the main streets. You're passing countless people that you're not having any interactions with. So I think there's probably going to be some distinction there between NPCs that are part of our story and our activities and NPCs that are there as more background noise than anything else. Also, when a lot of time is spent out in space, space is big. Space is supposed to have a certain amount of emptiness to it. Now, a game like Elite Dangerous probably goes a little bit too far with that. No Man's Sky obviously did. But when we start talking about, Star Citizen, you're going to have interactions with other characters. Now, whether they're real players or whether they're NPCs is going to be probably dependent on what part of the, space you're in, how many real players are actually there, what type of activities you're actually doing. Those are all different factors, but again, I think just to get to the point, I wouldn't worry about it. You're going to get to a point in this game where there's going to be a exciting, emerging experience. You're going to be kind of brought into the game, and just because there's people that are going to be walking around just to kind of be fillers and give you the right environmental feeling, I don't think you're necessarily going to see that having an impact on that 9-to-1 ratio. Jeff Hardy says, STLYoungblood, do you think by 3.0 we'll get the ability to recharge our first-person weapons on our ships? Perhaps make the storage lockers for weapons auto-rechargers to give us the ability to tear up the ship's lockers and built-in charging stations. I wouldn't hold your breath for that coming in 3.0. I think the introduction to Star Marine in 2.6 is going to be a big step in that direction. There's probably going to be like recharging stations around the maps. Maybe not, I don't know. But I think we're going to start to see those types of mechanics actually implemented in the game. I don't think 3.0 is going to be that. I could be wrong. 3.0 is supposed to bring cargo and with that piracy. And, if you start thinking about piracy out in the persistent universe, then you're talking about combat, and having that sort of mechanic in place would be helpful, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be there in that application. Now, I think as far as how it's actually going to be done, I think you'll probably have, there's ships with arms racks, for example. So, the Hoplite, for example, has an arms rack. The Redeemer has an arms rack. The Retaliator is supposed to have a heavy armor charging station and weapons charging stations in the dropship module. So, I think we're going to get it. I think it's been talked about, and we've seen the devs kind of mention how they want to make it work, but I don't think it's going to be as early as 3.0 when you consider that's just 2 releases from now, and the one in between now and 3.0 is just starting to introduce the new first-person shooter mechanic. So I wouldn't say 3.0, but I mean maybe by the end of next year. Data says, what do you think about the ex-UEE carriers being for sale once in-game, like the Hornet, the old UEE fighter being purchasable, and the Lightning not? So I assume you mean here carrier-based ships, or just UEE ships in general. I think it's important to know that the combat ships that we have that are considered UEE ships, like the Gladius, the Gladiator, the Super Hornet, the Ghost, all of those, they're all going to be more of civilian civilian versions of those. So, we've got the Super Hornet, which is going to be the most military-esque of all the ships. Because there's the F-7A, which is the version that the actual UEE uses. And that's not necessarily going to be for sale. Now, that being said, I think that is going, and I kind of backtracked just a little bit, it is going to be for sale, but it's going to be questionable on how you actually get it. They're not, we don't know what their plans are, the developers, as far as releasing that ship to us. We've seen designs, we've seen changes on it. I've seen, a couple mentions back and forth on which way they're going to go with it. So I think when we just start talking about this, the F8 Lightning is definitely not going to be for sale for players. And I have absolutely no problem with that. Having a military exclusive ship makes a lot of sense. They're not, if you go to the United States government, they're not going to sell you an F-22 Raptor. It's just not going to happen. Now, we're not being sold F-15 Eagles and F-14 Tomcats and, those either. So it's kind of a stretch. But I think that's also because we're not really a flight-going people right now. I don't fly myself to work. In the Star Citizen universe, that's a different story. I'm also not being attacked by pirates constantly, so I don't necessarily need a fighter. But in the persistent universe of Star Citizen, that's a different story. So it kind of makes sense. I have no issues with the Lightning not being for sale. The military should probably be the strongest force in the game. So if you want to talk about them being able to maintain that level of balance, having the most capable fighter out there makes a lot of sense. I think us being able to fly it in the campaign is going to be exciting, and I think there's going to be opportunities for people to steal them, but not being able to purchase them is absolutely the right idea. Sir Dolphin says, will Star Marine be free with the game, or will it be an add-on? It's free with the game, so if you own, the Star Citizen universe, you'll be able to actually play Star Marine. Star Marine is essentially an electronic access video game inside the video game. It's very similar to like what we have with Arena Commander, where you're flying a virtual ship in a virtual game. It's actually sold as a video game in the world of Star Citizen. People can actually play it. Some people use it as a trainer. Some people do it as like competitive type of thing. But it is just a virtual experience. But regardless, I'm digressing a little bit. As long as you have the persistent universe, you'll be able to play Star Marine. Danny F02, if I blow up a large ship, will it become an explorable wreck like in the 3.0 demo? Or is it just going to vanish if it's not part of some mission instance? You should be able to go in and explore it. Now, the question there is going to be how bad you damage that ship. Now, I think right now what we see is ships are very, very prone to exploding. And I think I'm hoping that's something that ends up going away. Because what we really should have in the persistent universe is catastrophic damage to the ship that just gets it to a point to where it's no longer operable. So like if you want to kill the people inside, you kill the life support system. If you want to just leave them stranded, you kill the engines. If you want to be able to board them, you're not going to blow the ship to hell. So I think we may see you get to a point where you do enough damage that the ship breaks apart, and then we get to see what we actually have that are explorable wrecks today. I think it all kind of goes into the way that they're factoring everything within the game engine. So if you're a fighter and you've got you engage somebody and you destroy them, you could call in a redeemer or a reclaimer to come in and actually salvage that for parts, or just to get the raw pieces of the ship out. So yes, you should be able to do that. I'm hoping that the only time a ship really explodes is if you end up hitting like munitions store in the ship. Kind of like if you were to take on a Polaris and you ended up blowing a big ass hole in the torpedo room. I wouldn't be surprised if the ship then exploded into a whole bunch of little pieces. Or if you end up taking out a main reactor on a ship and it goes, Nova or whatever, and then it explodes. But for the most part, I'm hoping we get to a point to where the ships become disabled, not completely destroyed. And if they do become disabled, then yes, you will be able to explore them. Moldani says, I have a question that has been in my head for several years now. I want to do a lot, I want to solo a lot, and I want to fly a big ship. I assume I'm not alone in this. I've been trying to find the ideal solution for this for ages. Apart from small fighters, I own a Carrier, as this might be the closest to ideal. I also have a CCU for a Caterpillar, as in I have been trying to find the ideal solution. Oh, I skipped that. Okay, basically what he's saying is he's got a Carrier, he's got a CCU for a Caterpillar, he's got 5 game packages, so he's not worried about NPCs because he can use the characters there. He wants to know, maybe should he melt everything and get an 890 jump, et cetera, because it's got a point defense system, and there's also the Phoenix is an option which has a point defense system as well, so he has a little bit easier time of defending himself. Whew, okay. So this question is interesting because it's a hard one to answer because you don't really mention what you want to do. I'm assuming if you're going to have one ship, you want to be able to do a little bit of everything, or at least have some options that are going to be available to you. So from that perspective, I think the Carrier is a pretty good fit. But I think between that or the Caterpillar should be one of the most modular, most adaptable ships in the game. So it would be hard for me to recommend anything but that Caterpillar since it's on your radar. You talk about the 5 game packages, you're going to have NPCs, which is great. NPCs are never going to be as good as a real character, though, so keep that in mind when you're kind of choosing how you're going to work this out. As far as melting everything and getting an 890 jump, and a Phoenix for that matter, those are both limited ships, so they're not really, for sale very often or even at all. I don't even think the 890 Jump's been for sale since it's been introduced. Even in the last 2 anniversary sales, it hasn't been available. I think the Phoenix was available once again. I think it's been for sale a couple times, but it's still in limited numbers. So I think you're not necessarily going to be in the best place if you decide to get one of those because, 1, they're going to be expensive, 2, they're going to be hard to get, 3, they're going to be hard to replace. So if you're melting everything to get an 890 Jump and you lose it, you're going to be without a ship for a while. So I kind of like the idea of being able to have a couple different options. Now, between the Carrack and the Caterpillar, it really depends on what you want to do. If you want to do more exploration, more touring, those types of things, then the Carrack by far would get my recommendation. But if you want to do anything other than those 2 options, then I think the Caterpillar's a better bet. Nerd Potato says, how would we be able to get a Bengal Carrier? So the Bengal Carrier, UEE exclusive, big-ass military ship. There is 2 ways that you can get a carrier. The first one would be to find a derelict, repair it, and then maintain it. And when I say maintain it, you have to actually be on the ship at all times. And when you log out, the ship stays put. So if somebody captures the ship while you're logged out, it's now their carrier, and you spend all that time to fix it up. That sort of thing is really only a good option for large organizations who are actually capable of maintaining a massive crew requirement over a significant period of time. Most people are going to find a Bengal Carrier in the very few instances that it happens, and are probably going to sell that information for a huge profit to an organization that wants to do something with it. Now, the other way is the crazier way, and that's to go try and capture a Bengal Carrier. So theoretically, you could find a carrier floating around in a system. You could bring in a huge fleet of ships. You could then end up overrunning it, taking out all its fighters, boarding it, taking it over from the inside, and then boom, you own a Bengal Carrier. Again, you're just really residing in that carrier, though. It could still be taken back. Not to mention trying to overtake a military capital ship that's fully crewed with military people and is likely not flying by itself is going to be a hell of a task and very unlikely. So, frankly, I would set your sights on not getting a Bengal Carrier and getting as close as possible with like a Javelin or something like that. And for the last question here, Shepard says, and this is our patron question for the day, said, will there always be a friend system or will it turn into a contact system where you can mark people as favorite? I think this is going to be part of the spectrum changes. So it'll be interesting to see how they continue to unveil that and what it ends up turning into. I think there's always going to be a contact system of some sorts where today it's not even friends, it's contacts. So I think that's kind of an idea of what you're going to see. As far as when you actually get into the persistent universe, I think you can tag people and have certain, like mementos about people. So, you might even be able to say, oh, I've run into this person before. He tried to hijack my ship. He's obviously going to be on my shit list, that type of thing. But as far as actually adding people, partying up, getting together in the game, that's going to be built into Spectrum. So then you get to communication between out of game, in game, and then how you communicate with people from each other. So I think it's going to develop from that. So that's it for this episode of The Inbox. If you guys have questions, please get them in. Otherwise, I appreciate you watching and have a wonderful day. Take care.